Best thing that ever happened to me was coming to America. I mean that honestly, unapologetically. Once I landed in America with my mother.
For many years, fans have harbored the desire to witness the reunion of the original KISS lineup, complete with the face paint, the fire, and the unforgettable spectacle that encapsulated an entire era. But in the year 2024, Gene Simmons ruined that fantasy with a few comments that were direct and unfiltered. Even though we have given him opportunities, Ace has not changed that a full KISS reunion would never take place. As Simmons acknowledged in what was the clearest and most uncensored comment he has ever made concerning guitarist Ace Frehley. This revelation confirmed what many people had dreaded would happen. What is Simmons' level of certainty? The question is, what transpired behind the scenes that caused him to permanently close the door? At the time of the band's formation in New York City in 1973, the lineup of Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, Peter Criss, and Ace Frehley appeared to be unbeatable. The group was more than just a band. An image, a brand, and a cultural phenomenon were all things that they were. KISS became one of the most well-known groups in the world thanks to the extravagant stage makeup, pyrotechnics, and theatrical displays that took place throughout their performances. That achievement would not have been possible without Simmons, the Demon, and Frehley, the Spaceman. During the recording of legendary albums such as Destroyer in 1976 and Love Gun in 1977, Ace's guitar style, which was raw, melodic, and full of swagger, contributed to the formation of KISS. Behind the scenes, the four members of the band described the wild lifestyle that came with being a rock sensation, which included unending touring, fame, and excess. When KISS was in the height of their meteoric success, however, there were warning flags. The relationship that Frehley had with Simmons and Stanley started to become strained as his substance misuse problems became more severe. The methodical and business-minded attitude that Simmons took was in direct opposition to his reputation for being unpredictable, missing rehearsals, and partying all night till dawn. Ace Frehley left the band in 1982, following the completion of the sessions for the Creatures of the Night. According to the official explanation, the breakup occurred due to differences in creative direction. Nevertheless, those with knowledge of the situation realized that the true reason was much more personal than a combination of differences in outlook on life and a breach of trust. The breakup was a devastating blow to the band's fans. It was the beginning of a frustration that Simmons had been experiencing for decades, and even nostalgia tours were not able to completely heal him. KISS stunned the entire world in 1996 when they made the announcement that the band's original lineup would be doing a huge tour across the world. All of the spectators' expectations were fulfilled by the show. The iconic songs were played, the makeup was brought back, and the number of tickets sold broke all previous records. For a period of time, it appeared as though time had healed past wounds. In interviews, Simmons and Frehley were shown beaming and discussing the enchantment of being back together. They shared the stage together. In spite of this, the same problems that caused them to part ways in the 1980s started to rear their heads again behind the scenes. Once again, the dependability of Frehley became a source of concern. While Frehley struggled to reach the standards that Simmons and Stanley had set for him, they were devoted to maintaining rigid timelines and maintaining business discipline. At the end of February 2002, Frehley had quit KISS for the second time. Simmons remained cordial in public, but many with knowledge of the situation claimed that the parting was anything but friendly. The band has, during the course of its existence, brought in substitutes to play the part of the Spaceman. On the other hand, the supporters never completely gave up hope that the original four would become available again. On the other hand, Simmons' decision to talk with an uncharacteristically forthright tone about the reasons why it will never happen again in 2024 would be the moment that this fantasy would be shattered. After Ace Frehley quit KISS on February 2, 2002, there was a never-ending stream of calls for the band to get back together. Message boards, social media threads, and event parking lots were all packed with fan speculations about when the classic four will perform together again. Promoters noticed that cash signs, anniversary tours, goodbye tours, and one-off stadium events were being proposed year after year. There was an incredible amount of financial possibilities. The reunion gigs that took place in the 90s had brought in millions of dollars, and some who were within the industry felt that another run with the original lineup could be comparable to the most successful tours in the history of rock. There was never a time when the notion was absolutely out of the question within KISS. It was Simmons and Stanley's objective to keep their comments purposefully vague during interviews. They frequently used phrases such as "never say never" or "anything is possible." Those insignificant remarks kept the optimism alive. When the doors were closed, however, the situation was significantly more problematic. Despite the fact that Simmons was well known for his financial acumen and his eagerness to embrace opportunities, he also carried with him decades of resentment with what he perceived to be Frehley's lack of accountability. Ticket sales were not the only thing that Gene was concerned with. It was about ensuring that the band continued to uphold its professional standards. In his opinion, the KISS brand was dependent on discipline, timeliness, and consistency, and this was the area in which he and Ace had the most disagreements. When Simmons reached the year 2024, after years of whispers and never-ending speculation, he made the decision that it was time to put the topic of a reunion to rest for good. The inevitable question was posed to Gene Simmons during an interview with a rock radio station in the early 24th century. The query was whether or not KISS would ever get back together with Ace Frehley. The answer was yes. This time, there was no answer that was ambiguous. There is no diplomatic sidestep. Simmons gave a direct response, saying, "We have given him opportunities, but Ace will not change." When the interviewer pressed Simmons for more information, Simmons did not hold back an inch. Due to his history of substance abuse, failed obligations, and personal drama, he admitted that it was impossible for him to collaborate with Frehley in a professional capacity. He went on to say that even if it were for money, it would not be worth it. "Even though I have feelings for him, you can't run a band on maybes." The news came as a surprise to avid followers. Although it was not a secret that Simmons and Frehley had a history of conflict, the fact that Simmons stated unequivocally that a reunion would never take place and provided an explanation for his decision validated what many people had thought for years. Numerous music publications made news as a result of the comments. There were others who lauded Simmons for his honesty. Others attacked him for opening up about the band's personal problems in such a public manner. There was one thing that was certain, however, and that was the fact that the dream of a final original lineup KISS show had just evaporated. Immediately after Gene Simmons' statements were broadcast on the radio, the KISS fan community went into a frenzy. Fans who have been following the band for a long time have divided into two camps on social media. A number of people praised Simmons for finally speaking in a straightforward manner, stating that it was time to put a stop to the conjecture and acknowledge that the past was the past. He was accused of showing disrespect to Ace Frehley by other people, who argued that the spaceman had been an important part of KISS' golden years and that he deserved to be honored with one final concert. Rock publications and music blogs were quick to report on the story. Classic Rock referred to it as the final nail in the coffin of the reunion, and Rolling Stone was the publication that published an article examining the tension that had existed between the two men for decades. Even other musicians voiced their opinions, with some supporting Simmons' business-first approach and others advocating for the idea of putting the past behind them for the sake of the fans. Even the promoters took notice of it. Over the course of many years, they had been banking on the chance of capitalizing on the sentimental value of a complete reunion. The fact that Simmons publicly rejected those initiatives meant that they were practically dead. The industry was aware of what a great number of fans had a difficult time accepting. Never is the word that Gene Simmons uses, and he means it. Nevertheless, at the same time as there was a sense of closure, there was also shock and disappointment. After several decades of ambiguous responses and half-promises, the truth, regardless of how unpleasant it may be, was finally brought into the light. In recent years, the strained connection that existed between Gene Simmons and Ace Frehley has emerged as a character-defining aspect of the KISS narrative. The absence of a last full lineup reunion is a missing chapter that fans will always talk about, despite the fact that the band's reputation is solid, with over 100 million records sold, multiple tours that were completely sold out, and a spot in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Maintaining the integrity of the KISS brand has always been more important to Simmons than emotion. Numerous times, he has asserted that the band is more significant than any one of its members, including himself. Despite the fact that this concept has maintained KISS a powerhouse for decades, it has also meant that there are strict boundaries when members do not reach his criteria. Over the course of his career, Ace Frehley has continued to tour and make solo albums, frequently performing KISS classics in front of devoted audiences. However, despite the fact that he does occasionally respond to Simmons in interviews, he has also acknowledged his appreciation for the time that they did spend together on stage. In the end, the narrative of KISS without Ace is about two men whose chemistry generated magic in the 1970s, but whose differences grew too large to overcome. This is the message that the story conveys. The statement that Simmons made in 2024 just put into words what had been true for many years, namely that magic, at least in its original form, has been permanently eradicated. At the time of the year 2024, Gene Simmons had been providing answers to the subject of Ace Frehley for over half a century. It was his final and conclusive remark that brought an end to that chapter, not only for him, but for KISS as a musical group. We appreciate you watching. You may view another video by clicking here, and you should also make sure to subscribe to our channel.